Okay.
Welcome to Journey to Joy Live, a podcast to promote wellness, resilience, and inspire joy. Be empowered to balance your mental, physical, financial, aspirational, and social health while providing mental health awareness and breaking down the stigma of mental illness in the Black community. I'm your host, Dr. Int Joy, and I'm here to help you transform life's challenges into opportunities for joy. Let's begin the journey together. Hello, we are in episode 88, Calm Your Nerves, literally herbal and movement hacks for inner peace. And this is an awesome segue from last week's episode where we talked about how to stay calm when everything goes wrong. So we're going to really get into the meat of what you can actually do, some hacks to calm your actual nervous system. And I have a special guest, Erica Rascon here. Hello, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
She is the founder of Deeply Rooted Wellness Yoga. And a special shout out to Therapist T, who introduced me to her. Therapist T, unfortunately, wasn't able to be here tonight. So we had our last minute change of topic plans, which this is going to work out. But you will see Therapist T and Erica later on the show for sure. All right. So tell us about you.
Oh, hi, I'm Erica Rascon. I'm a 500-hour registered yoga teacher and YCEP with Yoga Alliance. All that means is that I've had about 1,000 hours of training and more than 1,000 hours of teaching, and I just love constantly learning about yoga and herbalism and helping people find joy within their bodies by feeling healthy and feeling socially healthy as well. So I'm so excited to be here and to be speaking with you, Dr. Joy.
I love the way you said that. Find the joy within their bodies, because that's really all what Journey to Joy Live is all about. Because we all have it. It's within our bodies, despite what's going on around us. So you can find her at Erica Rascon Yoga. And you are the founder of Deeply Rooted Wellness Yoga, as we mentioned. When did you get started with that?
So Deeply Rooted Wellness and Yoga started, I guess it technically started about 10 years ago, but it started as like a side hustle. I had a corporate job. I taught yoga on the side because I just loved it. But ultimately, I realized that if I want to take this seriously as a lifestyle and really help other people who want to create this as a lifestyle versus just a workout, I needed to dedicate more time and energy to it. So I've been full-time with Deeply Rooted for about 3 years, and that's been pretty game-changing.
That is so exciting. Well, so glad you're here. I can't say I practice yoga a lot. Probably the last time was a few years ago, but I do recognize it is a great practice for people to have.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so we're talking about our nerves, literally calming our nerves. And you had mentioned to me the nervous system. So, you know what I meant to ask you before we got live is that, did you want to describe what the nervous system is, if you feel comfortable with that, or I can describe it if not?
I mean, I could start off sort of with my very basic understanding and add in anything that you feel would be helpful. But from the level that we approach the nervous system, it's mostly the parasympathetic and sympathetic aspects that we pay a lot of attention to in yoga. And so with our nervous system, it's your nerves as well as your brain and how all of those things connect. And they don't control your emotional responses, but they can, your nervous system influences your emotional responses. So one thing that we do a lot within the yoga practice is look at how our actions and our habits serve either the parasympathetic nervous system response or the sympathetic nervous system response. And we adjust our energetic practices, physical practices, everything about our lives basically on the results that we want, because they're both good, right? There's no bad part of the nervous system, but there are some times where you want to tap into one more than the other, and we use yoga to do that.
That is awesome. So yes, that's a really great way to describe it. The parasympathetic nervous system is our rest and digest system, you know, when you're eating and relaxing. And of course, the sympathetic nervous system is when you need all the energy, that fight or flight. And that's where it's usually the sympathetic nervous system that's activated in trauma or anxiety. And so really we're trying to calm down our sympathetic nervous system when it comes to what we're talking about tonight. So
Right.
thank you. Now, what are some everyday signs that our nervous system is dysregulated? Because that's what we're here about. Obviously, if we can regulate it, maybe we didn't need some advice tonight. And how can we tell that we need to reset?
Mm. Yeah. So the first part, how can we tell when we're dysregulated?
Mhm.
It's different for everyone. We all have different levels of tolerance to stress. We all have different responses, even to traumatic experiences. So there's no one size fits all for stress and stress responses. You can tell when you don't feel great about how you're moving through life every day. If you
Yeah.
feel like you're constantly reacting to situations that are around you instead of mindfully responding, that's a sign that
Mm.
you're dysregulated. If you feel yourself in a state of I guess I could say hyper arousal, where you're
Mhm.
constantly on guard or you're overstimulated. So you just need a constant stream of things to do, to entertain, to distract. That's a sign that you're not regulated. But then there's also the other end of the spectrum where there's
Mhm.
inertia, there's fatigue, there's a lack of motivation. That may mean that you are understimulated or so overstimulated that you've shut down. And so
Mm.
that's still a type of dysregulation. So it looks different in all of us. It's really about how you feel and whether you feel that you're able to respond in your life or if you're stuck in survival mode and reacting.
That's a really good point. So that brings me back to what I was mentioning, that really tonight is all about calming down our sympathetic nervous system. Based on what you said about getting stuck and kind of like the demotivation, are we also talking about maybe we're stuck in our parasympathetic nervous system and kind of increasing that and adding motivation?
Mm, maybe. So there's a little caveat to that. One thing that we've learned, and something that I teach is called restorative yoga. And a lot of this
Uh-huh.
is about just bathing yourself in your parasympathetic nervous system response, right? We
Okay.
have pillows, we have blankets, we're
Ah,
chilling out. But just the act of sitting on a couch doesn't necessarily mean you're in your parasympathetic nervous system
good
state,
point.
right? It could mean that you are still stressed out, anxious,
Mhm.
depressed, and shut down. And yet that inertia isn't helping you rest. It's not helping your cellular repair. You're not feeling replenished and refreshed when you wake up. So, not moving isn't always the same as nurturing that aspect of your nervous system that needs care. And it really takes some discernment to know the two.
Love it, love it. That's very true. Because I mean, you can just be sitting there, and for people who have anxiety or trauma, some type of trigger, or even it may not be an identifiable trigger. Their just heart starts racing all of a sudden, and you realize, okay, I am definitely not in my parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
true rest for sure.
And
So yeah, that's
that's a lesson I had to learn on my own,
mhm.
obviously. So I thought that I was doing great by getting, maybe 7 to 8 hours of sleep and that I was doing well for myself by like resting. And what I meant by
Mhm.
resting was like laying on the couch and scrolling through my phone, and so I thought that I was taking care of myself. I was resting. And then I know the more I learned, it was like, oh, I don't feel replenished when I'm doom scrolling. I don't feel well rested if I fall
Mhm.
asleep in front of the TV or the tablet. So it's not true restorative practices if we aren't being mindful about how we're doing it.
Mindfulness and intention. We have to be intentional. It's not going to just fall on us. So, with
Yeah.
that said, why do we need to regulate our nervous system? Why can't we just let it go out of whack?
So as when we're kids, we have all the emotions and a lot of them are out of whack, and that's okay. It's all about us sort of
Oh.
learning how to manage the emotions and navigate them.
Mm.
As adults with responsibilities, we benefit greatly from learning how to manage our own emotional responses. There's two, like, I think, really, really big reasons for that. The first is that when we can manage our emotional responses and observe our habits and why we do things, we
Mhm.
empower ourselves to make positive changes where needed. So
Mhm.
if you find yourself emotionally responding, let's say to a conflict at work and you pop off, you might feel better for a second, but you didn't respond. You just reacted. You didn't have a
Mhm.
plan. Maybe you're getting fired. So
Exactly.
yeah. So we are in a better place of empowerment when we understand what we're doing and why we're doing it and then we can
Mhm.
choose to respond and respond according to our values rather than just responding to the first emotion that like bubbles up, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a huge one. The
Mhm.
second reason we need to care is just about our family and our communities, right? So when we're self regulated and we have self mastery over our thoughts, our actions, our habits, we can do a lot to improve our family situation at home. We can set better
Mhm.
examples for our kids, our nieces, our nephews, our
Very cool.
neighbors. Our engagements and interactions with other adults tend to go better, not always, but at least you have the tools to try to make them better.
Mm.
Um, and we can build stronger communities. You know, we don't react based on fear all the time. We don't react based on lack all the time. We can make conscious, short and long term decisions that align with our values, and that just benefits everyone, I think.
Yeah, and just long-term health. Like, if you're living in your sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight system, that affects your heart, your cardiac
Mhm.
functioning, your blood pressure goes up, you're more susceptible to heart disease, strokes,
Yeah.
diabetes, all kinds of different things with stress. Getting sick, your immune
Yeah.
system
Your
function
immune
goes
system.
down. So,
Mhm.
obviously, from a social aspect, it's important. From the aspect of not wanting to get fired because 'cause you're popping off on somebody, and then, of
That
course, medically. And it's interesting when you said that, you feel good in the moment when you've cussed them out, but later, the long-term consequences, you don't feel so good. Well, you feel good because you're listening to your body at the moment. Your body is telling you, "Fight, fight, fight," or
yeah.
"Cuss them out." Do all these things. But that's the thing about regulation is going against the grain of what's happening right now. So regulating means going backwards. The heart rate is going up. Let's try to do some things to calm it down, as opposed to encouraging it to continue to race. So
And
that's
I'm so
definitely.
glad you oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go
Um,
ahead.
I'm so glad you mentioned a lot of the medical benefits because I think as a very heart-centered social person, I automatically go that route.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, like with the physical body, there's this cycle that can set in as well. So if you're dysregulated, self-mastery is not a priority, then you find yourself reacting, right? We talked about that. But you have these internal reactions, your stress responses, your cortisol levels are going through the roof. You're not releasing melatonin, so you're not sleeping properly. Your immune system suffers, which then means you're usually not sleeping properly later. And it creates this whole cycle. So physically, stress is one of the, contributing causes to so many physical ailments. And we could just save our own bodies by taking better care of ourselves. So so glad you reminded me. Yeah, that just it's so practical, but so true.
Yes, for sure. Sometimes we're not thinking about it because we're thinking about things in the moment. So, yeah, very key. Now, as far as you and your yoga practices, how has your yoga and herbalism, because we're talking about herbs here too,
Mhm.
practices influence your understanding of stress and its impact on the nervous system?
Ooh, so there's a chicken and egg here. I'm not sure which comes first, but
Yeah.
I started my teaching and education journey about 10 years ago. But
Yeah.
just 6 years ago, I got pregnant and I had
Mm.
perinatal depression.
Mm.
So, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, most people know about postpartum depression that happens after birth. But perinatal depression extends the scope of the entire pregnancy and afterwards. And so I realized that stress that you do not acknowledge, it's still there. And
Mhm.
those things can bubble up when you are in a situation that's new, unfamiliar. Your body's going through hormonal changes. All that stuff rises up to the surface and it has to be
Mhm.
dealt with. So I found myself needing to get relief from that. Like, how do I deal with the stresses of becoming a new parent, of not
Yeah.
planning to become a new parent? How do I deal with the stresses
Mm.
of changes at work? Because as a yoga teacher, pregnancy impacts how I work.
Mhm.
There were a lot of things that I
Mm.
needed, and that's why I learned them. Um, so yeah, it was really to kind of start off by helping myself and then look around and realizing like, oh, other people could benefit from that too. So the first thing I would say that is most impactful to me from my
Mhm.
practice is just learning to be an observer.
Mm.
So in the beginning of the yoga and meditation practice, a lot of times we talk about just notice how you're feeling, notice your breath. And a lot of times we're on automatic. We don't let ourselves notice if we're taking deep breaths or shallow breaths. we don't notice where the tension is in our body until it becomes pain, you know? So just being an observer through the lens of like yoga and meditation helped me observe when I was not breathing properly, and that's why I felt anxious. Or,
Gotcha.
you know, yeah, right. And like for you, you're like, yes, I
Yeah.
get it. But for me,
Yeah.
that was like mind blowing. It's like, oh, I'm feeling anxious because I'm holding my breath for 3 minutes. Obviously,
Oh, wow.
right? It's like I would get in a tense situation and I have shallow or no breathing and I have an anxious response. I'm like, okay, I can address this by breathing better. So just being more observant, I think, is one of the main keys for yoga. For herbalism,
Mm-hmm.
narrowing it down is hard, but I think it's very helpful to realize that herbs work on a physical level, like they can actually help to repair the physical nerve tissue and help to repair damage,
Oh.
which is cool. But then they also work on like an energetic and emotional level too. So there are herbs that are adaptogens. And not only do they help with the nerve healing, but they also help with our stress response so that we don't feel so reactionary. And that was huge for me. I have some, I don't know if we want to talk about them now or later, but some
Yeah,
herbs.
go ahead. I want to know.
Okay. So some of the ones that helped me the most were not the ones I saw online all the time.
Uh-huh.
I felt like people were holding out on me. Um, but I started off with chamomile and
Uh-huh.
um, ashwagandha. Ashwagandha was great.
This one's
Chamomile,
here.
no effect at all. I could drink 5 gallons of chamomile tea. It's
Mm-hmm.
gonna be wired. So trial and error helps. But I would say ashwagandha was one that if you have access to ashwagandha as a tincture, or even a capsule, I found that that was really helpful for minimizing that initial nervous feeling that I had every morning when I woke up.
Oh,
Like I would,
wow.
yeah, like I would wake up and immediately have a to-do list and then immediately feel stressed out before I even open my eyes. And I found that using ashwagandha once a day, I would say at least for about 3 weeks is when I started to notice it. That immediate response calmed down.
Wow.
Yeah, and it really helped me like feel calm enough to start planning my day without panicking, and I got so much more done. So I would recommend that one for sure
You
for
basically
people.
drink it as a tea? How
So
do you
I didn't have ashwagandha
consume it?
as a tea because I
Okay.
already knew that I was dealing with diagnosed anxiety and depression. So for
Uh-huh.
me, I went straight for the tincture, which is much more potent and much more concentrated. I would recommend starting off with very low dose form for anyone who is just kind of
And you said
experimenting.
tincture? Because this is an area, it's not my expertise.
Ooh,
What is
yeah,
that?
okay. So I'm so, I'll bookmark the herbs that are helpful and then explain the
All
different forms
right.
of them really
Yeah,
quick.
how we actually consume these herbs. Okay.
Yeah.
Or inhale, whatever. Okay, go
Oh,
ahead.
thank you. Thank you so much. So you have your herbs in their most natural whole foods form, and that would
Uh-huh.
be a tea. So you have your leaves, your roots, nuts, berries, all the things as teas, right? So that's going to be
Mhm.
the most gentle approach that you can usually take.
Yes, makes
If
sense.
you want to concentrate it a little bit more, in liquid form, there's a tincture. And all a tincture is the herbal matter that's been soaked in alcohol or glycerin or honey, some other sort of preservative. And it starts to pull the chemical constituents out of that herb, concentrate them. So then when you take it, you're getting more potency without drinking 10 gallons of tea.
Oh, that
Um,
makes sense.
that's helpful. And then you also have capsules, and those are usually just the herb or the root, the root directly ground up very, very fine and put in
Mhm.
a capsule so that it's easy to swallow.
Mhm.
You might also have essential oils. Are you familiar with those?
Yes, for sure, essential oils. Oh, yeah.
Yes. So essential oils are the plants, and they usually use steam or ideally not heat, some sort of cold press method to extract the constituents that you want and have a very concentrated oil form of it. They usually smell very strong, very aromatic. But yeah, so there's different ways that you can have them, and it can increase in potency. So tinctures and capsules are going to be much more potent than just
Gotcha.
having the herb and tea form.
Okay.
So going back to the herbs that were really helpful, I went for ashwagandha in that tincture form because I already had like a condition that I was treating versus just trying to manage things. um,
Gotcha.
yeah. And another one I'd recommend would be, oh, I don't want to limit them, but lemon balm is a really good adaptogen.
Oh,
It
wow.
Yeah, and it's a very light lemony flavor, so it's easy on the palate for people who don't like really strong teas. And the last one that I'll mention, because I can go all day about herbs,
You
the
can
last
go
one
all
that
day. We want to hear it.
I love plants and I love plant medicine. But Tulsi, don't sleep on Tulsi. It's Tulsi. It's often called holy basil. There are three types of holy basil, but if you buy like in a store, they usually blend the three types together. One thing I love about Tulsi is that it's not just great as an adaptogen. It's not just great for cellular repair. It also supports your nervous system. It supports your immune system, which is something we talked about. Our immune systems are often compromised when we're highly stressed or under chronic stress. And Tulsi helps to fortify your immune system, which
Wow.
is really
Wow.
awesome. It's anti-inflammatory. So if you're dealing with a lot of gut inflammation and things like that, it can help to reduce it. And once your gut is healthier, your hormone production can be normalized. And it's just a beautiful chain reaction from there. So if you haven't looked up Tulsi, please do. Please talk with your trusted
Never heard of it.
clinicians about
Yeah.
ashwagandha and Tulsi and lemon balm and just kind of see what adaptogens could be helpful for you.
This is really great because, people come to see me. I'm a psychiatrist. I can give medication, but then a lot of people are hesitant to medication, which is cool because I'm slow to prescribe it. I'm not just like, here, just take this pill.
Take
But
it.
a lot of people ask me, what are some alternatives, some supplements, and herbs? I'm just like, it's just not my area, but I really would like to know about it. So this is some great information. You did name three. You also mentioned you didn't want to talk forever. Are there at least two others if people are just wanting to know what others that they can try, and what do you know about the different interactions? Can you do all of them at once?
Yes. Ooh, so many good things. Okay. So first, I am one of those herbalists that honor the allopathic and like holistic naturopathic way. I think that there are medications that have saved lives. So I don't deter people from life-saving medicine. That's not my jam. But if you're at a point where you're interested in an herbal remedy, two additional ones you might consider. One would be Gotu Kola. It's Gotukola. And Gotu Kola is really helpful for focus, improved
Mm,
memory.
nice.
It is also an adaptogen, so it's going to help with the stress response in the body, help you moderate it.
Mhm.
But for me, as someone that was also going through depression and anxiety with some other things, I found that it really helped with the mental focus because when you get overwhelmed, overstimulated, it's hard to focus and get things done and be productive. And then as a Virgo and type A, I don't feel good about myself if I'm not productive. So, it just kind of helps stop that spiral that I get into. So definitely check out Gotu Kola if focus is one of the ways that, or a lack of focus is how you respond to
That's
stress.
good because I see a lot of people with ADHD. In fact, I have ADHD, so I might be looking at that one myself.
Yeah, and it has a kind of woody, like a very earthy, woody taste to it. So I even put it in my coffee in the morning, like in the
Oh,
filter
nice.
with the ground coffee. And then it makes like an herbal coffee blend that is so like just easy to and palatable. I really like it. If we had to pick one more, rosemary.
Oh, yeah.
Rosemary. And
I
I
love
want to use
rosemary.
rosemary because it's easily accessible. I think the ones that I've mentioned, you might have to look for a little bit. But rosemary, it's in Kroger, it's in Publix, it's wherever you shop. It's probably in
Correct.
your yard. So yeah, I'd recommend rosemary. It's also really helpful for focus, and it's helpful for those of us who are well, we're all aging, but for those of us who are a little bit older. I'm turning 40 this year, and my
Awesome.
grandmother
Wouldn't have
passed.
known.
Really? Thank you. But I mean, I'm
Black
happy to
girl
be 40.
magic. Yeah.
Yes, it's working out, girl. Now the sag might happen, but the cracks so far not, and I'm really excited.
Hey.
But sorry, I got distracted with the rosemary. Yeah, so it's easily accessible. It's not super expensive. You can have it as a tea or an essential oil and diffuse it or put it on your skin. It's pretty gentle and easy to work with. So I really like it. But for those of us who are yeah, as I was saying with aging, it really helps with battling degenerative mental states and brain
Mm.
states. So I don't
Mm.
want to like say it cures them, right? But there's a lot of very promising research done in animal studies, but also more recently in humans that show that it can help with slowing down cognitive decline that's attributed to dementia and Alzheimer's. It also
Mhm.
helps with focus. And in terms of like antibacterial, antimicrobial properties, it has a lot of fun things like that too, which you may not even like need, but it's nice that it's there.
Right.
So yeah, so if you're just like kind of wanting to dip your toe in the water with adaptogens that are easily accessible, I'd start with rosemary and just kind of see how you feel and just make it a nice little aromatic experience.
That's so awesome. And as far as the interactions, based on personal experience or what you may have studied, are there like, oh no, you can't take this one with this one, or is it pretty much you can take them all at once?
Please don't take them all at once. Please don't. Like, there's some you can stagger. Like, you can stagger rosemary and lemon balm, for example. They're both food grade substances and you're fine. But there's one called St. John's wort.
Oh,
St.
yeah.
John's wort is
Yep.
one of the most effective antidepressant
Yeah.
non-pharmaceutical substitutes there are. But you don't want to mix them with your pharmaceutical product because they
Yep.
will just counteract each other and nothing positive will come out of that.
Correct.
So you don't want to take St. John's wort with other things. And that's also part of why I don't usually recommend St. John's wort. You want to be under
Good.
the care of a trusted herbalist if you're working with that herb. Um, Most of the other ones are pretty benign. That's why I tend to recommend them first. You do want to be aware of certain health conditions, though. So
Yeah.
if you are on any sort of SSRI, which I guess we kind of talked a little bit about, you want to talk to your physician before you add
Mhm.
herbal supplements into your diet. If you have any condition, even if you don't think it's related, glaucoma, liver damage, anything like that, please contact a professional herbalist or talk to your physician because sometimes these herbs can help those conditions, but if you don't have the conditions, then it's not going to help you that same
At
way.
all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so this isn't one of those where you just want to pull something off the shelf and mix it all
'Cause
into a
it's
big.
healthy. Yeah.
Yeah, so do work with an herbalist, do your research, talk to your physician. But once you have those bases covered, there's so many great options.
That's good. I'm glad you mentioned St. John's wort because that is the one us psychiatrists know about because as you mentioned, it interacts pretty poorly with the antidepressants, the SSRIs, because they both increase serotonin and it can run the
Mm,
risk of serotonin syndrome. So we don't want that. That's a emergency medical crisis. Now, you mentioned that rosemary is easily accessible. The other one's not so much. Where are we finding these things? Are we going to certain stores, Amazon?
The
Where are we going?
internet. The internet.
Right.
I try not to push too many people to Amazon, but you can find it there, and there are other suppliers that I probably trust more with greater consistency and quality and reliability. So shameless plug for Mountain Rose Herbs. They specialize in organic herbal products. Star West is another pretty popular one. You might want to check them out. But I also create my own herbal blends and I have individual herbs as well on my Deeply Rooted Wellness website. So if you go to deeplyrootedwellness.com and click shop, you can find a lot of the herbs that I talked about, as well as some proprietary blends, like our restorative calming tea, which has oat and alfalfa and a bunch of other really nourishing adaptogens that are in it, since we're talking about those. So yeah, just take a look at the shop. Pretty much everything's there. I try to make it easy for you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And there was a comment on Instagram. I don't know if this is something that you can comment on because you did mention perinatal depression, and someone just asked about any advice for perimenopause. Within your field and experience, any of these herbs can help with perimenopause.
It well, what I guess what are the symptoms that they want to address? So like
That's a
black,
good point.
yeah, yeah. So
So,
if you're having hot flashes, something like black cohosh could be very helpful. But you also want to make sure it doesn't interact with anything you're already on. There's also blue coash. That's something that could be looked into. So I'm so hesitant to answer questions like that because I don't know the person's like medical history, but please feel free to like DM me on Instagram. If is that did that come through Instagram?
it was through
Okay,
Instagram,
yeah,
yes.
just DM
And
me
you
and
know what? I also made a comment, I replied to their comment that on March 27th, I will be interviewing an OB-GYN physician and we will be talking about menopause, perimenopause, hormone replacement. So the person who made that comment, please do come back so that we can talk about it. But good point, Erica, that really these herbs, we're talking about different specific symptoms that you might have. So you mentioned the hot flashes. A lot of times in perimenopause, you might get depression, which is kind of up to par with what we're talking about, or you might experience anxiety or dryness or low sex drive. So there's a lot of different symptoms. So good point.
Yeah. Yeah, and like with Damiana, that's one that people use for like low libido and dryness and sort of bringing your hormones into a slightly more consistent state of homeostasis, right? So it really just depends on what it is. But if we're talking about like depression or if we're talking about mood regulation and stuff like
she
that.
said increased anxiety at cycle time.
Ooh, yeah, okay. So then the adaptogens that I mentioned would be helpful as well. You might also want to check out something that's called Devil's Claw. It's not my favorite name.
I know, what?
It's a terrible name, but it can help with pain if you ever have pain. I also find it kind of creates a more neutral mood for me. But yeah, those are some good options.
This is great. Awesome. So, what are some practical ways that we can manage our stressors and stop overloading our nervous system? We talked a lot about herbs. What are some other practical tips that you might have?
So, the first is to pay attention to your intake. And this is the intake that comes through all of your senses. What are you listening to? What are you watching? What are you like allowing on your body? Like, do you allow your body to be in spaces that feel safe, that feel welcoming, that feel comfortable? Or do you place yourself in situations that you already know will be stressful around people that don't encourage you, people that don't uplift you, right? And I mean, what you smell to a degree that can impact your nervous system, but there are some fragrances that can. So if you had an ex, for example, that you were just hanging on to for dear life and you can't let that go and you keep that person's perfume or whatever around, you're kind of adding to your own stress. Like
trauma. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like we just want to be mindful of our intake through our senses. So to give an example of what I see versus the outcome people want, and I'll use my own life and family for this. A lot of people I care about scroll before they go to bed. They scroll while they're eating, or watching TV. So there's some sort of screen interaction. They surround themselves with people that won't say they're dramatic, but there's always dramatic things happening when they're around. And then we listen to music that's all about relationships that are failing and the terrible social things that we interact with and all these unhealthy coping mechanisms. Just go to the club, dance and drink it out, you know? So being aware that those things are also stressors that influence your nervous system, you can start making better choices about them. So be aware of the intake and then make choices. What can you do to cut out unnecessary stress? So let's say you watch TV while you're eating. And what you like to watch are murder mysteries, post-apocalyptic dramas where everything is just gone to the pits of hell and back.
Yeah.
All the dramas with family dramas, who's cheating on whose illegitimate baby is this, like all the things. Those are things that your brain doesn't really process as being fake. Your brain is just receiving that information and giving you a emotional response back.
Exactly. That's why I can't watch that stuff. Stuff like Deliverance or the paranormal activity stuff. Abuse. You know, I deal with all this stuff in my work life, my work days. So I can't be watching this kind of stuff. And my husband loves it. So I'll go on my lunch break and he's literally watching Netflix, watching people get murdered and all kinds of. I'm like, what are you watching? Let me go back into my office.
That is a good response. That is a helpful response because it's the same way with me. Like I used to think I was just too sensitive, so I couldn't watch those things. And there is, HSP, what's that phrase? Highly sensitive person. Like that's a phrase, that's a real thing, right? But it's also very natural. Like if I were to ask you, doctor, do you find death, rape, and murder to be entertaining? Your response would be,
hell no.
So like I think most people would respond that's not entertaining, but we watch it for entertainment and we stress ourselves out, right? So yes, just allow yourself to be an observer of your intake and through all of your senses and start cutting out those stressors that just aren't serving you, aren't helping you in any way. I'd say that's the most practical place to start.
Even down to my toddler, my 4-year-old, he had had a dream. He runs into my room in the middle of the night, of course, because they love to wake you up. He's like, I dreamed about a ghost. The ghost woke me up out of my sleep. And so the next day, he's looking at my phone and he's watching like this game with a ghost. I said, you know what? Didn't you have a dream about a ghost last night? Oh, but yeah, this is fun. This is funny. Legend, you had a dream about a ghost last night. Okay, mommy, you're right. I change it. So I'm just like,
Good
it's
job.
all you gotta do.
Good job. He is Legend is a role model for all of us. Let's just say that. Because it's true. Like, and I'm sorry to throw my husband under the bus. Alejandro, I love you. But that is a mature response to have, because I remember coming home from work. My husband was watching the last 2 seasons of Game of Thrones years ago. The man is standing 2 feet away from our massive screen with his arms folded, like just intensely watching. He cannot pull his eyes away. And even after the series had ended, it's all he talked about for like 4 or 5 days. I'm like, baby, you realize you are emotionally invested in this completely fictitious world with fictitious people. And like, that's like your body was holding all that tension and it's still holding it days later. And so it's like we kind of laugh with Legend saying, okay, I'll put it down and I'll change. But even for adults, that can be really challenging to cut those stressors that we don't need.
Yeah, I like funny shows. Even somebody commented on Instagram, they like kid shows and family shows. And I do love Love is Blind, Married at First Sight. And sometimes when there's like some dramatic thing happening, which is like, that's why y'all single. It kind of gets to my spirit. Like, what is wrong with you? Why are you acting like that? So I have to like catch myself on that. But that's a light, gentle show. So I'll continue to watch it. But yeah,
Yeah,
but
and
The
give
Office,
yourself joyful moments. It's fine.
right. The Office, I can watch that over and over and over again. I've seen that series a million times.
Yeah. And there's some things where like I said in the very beginning, right? Everyone's tolerance is different. Everyone's response is different. So what might be too intense for me or inappropriate for me, it's not true for everybody. Some of us can do fine with a little drama in our lives.
Exactly. Yeah. Hopefully,
Yeah.
resilience is something. Now, I feel like yoga didn't get much play during this discussion because we've
Yes.
been talking about how to calm our nerves through movement and herbs. We spend a lot of time on herbs, but which is great because I feel like for the most part, people probably have questions about herbs than yoga. Yoga gets a lot of play out there. People know about yoga, but what can you tell us about yoga that maybe we don't know about yet that will help us calm our nerves?
Ooh, yes. So all of it's yoga. So when we're talking about herbalism, breath work, nervous system regulation, it's all within the system of yoga. So I don't consider it a deviation, but I could definitely see how some
No.
would. So yoga is not just the stretching and the strength building that's done on a yoga mat in a class. It's sadly kind of been reduced to that out west, and we can have a
Yes.
whole different conversation on that.
Right.
But originally, if we're looking back at text from it, you have some very ancient texts from Africa, a lot more that come from India and Nepal, and I would say like northeastern Africa, but I digress. So there's a lot of text about it, and the most ancient texts use yoga as a tool for spiritual liberation, not exercise.
That makes sense.
So all those practices of just breath work and meditation and energetic management, all of that was to allow the human practicing it to be totally liberated. They were not controlled by their surrounding environment. They were not controlled by their emotions. They were not controlled by the illusions of this world, but rather aimed to see the heart and the truth of everything. All that stuff gets missed in most yoga classes here in the US. So I just wanted to clarify that. Like, it's all yoga.
Thank
It's all
you.
included. We need to just talk about this in a whole different thing.
I know,
But
right?
yeah, and it's wild because there are people who have attained that level of liberation, and we're
Yeah.
down here stretching and down dogging and not even realizing like that could be something that we're also working towards.
Well,
But
how
if
can
you're
we
just
get
getting
to that, Erica? You sound like you're describing my runner's high after a 12-miler, but not everybody wants to come out.
Constant runner's high. But I guess the way that you get there is through devotion and consistency.
Yeah.
So the first step, as I mentioned, is awareness, mindfulness, being an observer. You don't have to know yoga asana names and proper alignments and all that. Just allow yourself to like maybe lay down on your couch or in your bed, recline, get all the pillows you need to feel comfortable, close your eyes, and just starting from your toes, work from your toes up your body and just notice what you feel.
Grounding.
So a lot of times when we're feeling in a very high stress state, we're hyper aroused, sympathetic nervous system is just going away, we're not grounded, and we can't make choices from a place of safety, security, stability, all those good things. So when you just let your body rest and you allow yourself to pay attention to your body, you can ground all that, stressful, anxious energy. And you allow yourself to bring awareness to where that stress and tension has been stored in your body so that you can then move and help liberate it or at least address it. You mentioned that a lot of people who view this are women, we're women. So a lot of us store that tension in our hips, our shoulders, and our jaw. Those are three major areas. But for women, hips are a big one. We store a lot of tension and stress in our hips. We also have a lot of emerging research that is helping us understand how generational trauma is passed on through habits, but also genetically. And we don't think about trauma and genetics, right? We kind of imagine one as being just thoughts and memories and ideas and the other is
an experience. Yeah.
But nope. So just allowing yourself to pause, to do a little scan of your body, let yourself get grounded and be aware. I think that's the first step into sort of noticing what's your baseline. Where are you starting off? And then you can build on from there based on what you observe.
Awesome. Well, Erica, I thank you so much. There's still so much more to learn. Like I told you, time goes by fast. Yes. Erica will be back on Journey to Joy Live with Therapist T. We're going to talk about why talking isn't enough, the healing your body actually needs. So we'll talk about somatic and energy healing. So more to come on this alternative type therapeutic strategies. Now, my last question for you, like I ask everybody, because we're on Journey to Joy Live. What's your personal journey to joy been like?
My personal journey to joy has been a journey of self-discovery, but empowerment. I allowed myself to be very influenced by a lot of external forces growing up. And I became an adult and realized I didn't really feel confident in decision making. I wasn't intuitive. I looked for validation outside of myself all the time. And so part of my stepping into joy is empowering myself to trust my intuition, to trust what my body is telling me when I move, to trust my thoughts and opinions on things without needing to get validation outside of myself, and also to just find joyful and empowering community. Like I'm super stoked to be doing the podcast with Therapist T because she's someone that brings in a different aspect to somatic healing than I do. And like I've learned so much from her and she's been learning from me. And I'm just so excited for that next generation. But yeah, joy for me has been all about self-empowerment so far.
Self-empowerment. Oh, you said all the things. I love it. Well, I appreciate you, Erica. Thank you for being on here. You'll be back soon. And enjoy. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Enjoy. Take care, everybody.
You're welcome. This has been an Enjoy Life production. If you're in a crisis, don't hesitate. Call, text, or chat 988 for immediate support. Please note, this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional treatment. If you're looking for therapy or medication management through Enjoy Life, visit www.drenjoylife.com to request a consultation. I accept Aetna for Georgia residents, and out-of-pocket services are available for others. I'm licensed in Georgia, Florida, Michigan, Tennessee, Maryland, Wisconsin, New Hampshire, Illinois, Virginia, and Minnesota. Be sure to grab your copy of the Enjoyno on Amazon for $39.08 to help you on your wellness journey. And remember, Journey to Joy Live is every Thursday at 7 p.m. Thank you for joining me. And until next time, may you continue to transform challenges into joy.